And we're live. Hi, Jesse. How are you?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. It's so nice to talk to you, and I'm very excited about all the stuff that we're gonna share with my audience and then with your audience once we go live on your channel.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. I'm stoked. We've been actually talking about like trying to coordinate and get everything together for was it like a month and a half or two.
Yeah,
I'm glad our schedules finally aligned.
exactly. It's sometimes it's difficult, but I'm glad we're finally doing this.
Yeah, totally.
So I have actually quite a few questions that I've collected
Okay.
from my audience that I'd love to hear your experience on these subjects and all that stuff. But first, do you mind just introducing yourself and talking about what you do and your experience in this whole crazy world of UX design, web development, all that stuff?
Sure. Yeah. My name is Jesse Showalter. I am a UI UX designer, kind of like digital designer of all kinds, I guess, and I do front end development as well. I'm currently working full time for a tech startup. It's an iOS and Android Android app called Hobnob, which is like a text-based, like event-based kind of application. So I focus on mainly like the design aspect and some front end stuff as well. I worked freelance for years. I worked for creative agencies. I'm a self-taught designer that eventually went back to school and really didn't enjoy that experience too much because I had learned so much from experience. So I'm really a person who champions learning by doing. I teach on YouTube for that reason because I was flipping burgers in kitchens before I found design, and I found something I really loved that I could just allow myself to be creative and solve problems. And it's just a really fun and exciting life to kind of live. And so I want to help other people do that as well, to accomplish their goals, to learn skills, and just to be awesome in general. That's my biggest hope is for people just to be awesome people and love their life. That's me.
That's awesome. And it's very interesting that you came to design not by accident, right? But you didn't have that in mind at first, right?
I didn't have that in mind at first. I was actually a musician, so playing a lot of like music, actually touring in bands. And my wife, girlfriend at the time, is an artist. She is a photographer, a tattoo artist, lots of amazing. She's just so talented. She blows my mind still constantly with her creativity. And I was looking for something because I didn't want to tour anymore, didn't want to play as much anymore, but I didn't want to work in kitchens. And so she was really a driving force. Somebody who said, if you want to, you can. You just have to put in the time. And so she helped me kind of look and find my passions. And the first thing was a bootleg copy of Photoshop, I'm sorry to say, making really bad band flyers and posters. And that was like the niche that got me in the door, and then started kind of honing that skill. Got an internship, got my first like in-house gig, and then it just kept going from there. But it definitely wasn't. I'm definitely, as a kid, I was somebody who really liked taking things apart and figuring out how they worked and putting them back together. And I didn't realize that I could apply that into this industry. And when I realized that was like a connection, I was like all sorts of excited.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And so how did you start learning? Actually, a lot of my questions are around, sorry for the beeping, that's the
Oh, that's
bread
okay.
machine, making bread.
Amazing.
But a lot of the questions that I have for you are around, you know, learning what learning path to take and all that stuff and the
Okay.
different courses. How did you figure that out back in the day when you were like, okay, so maybe I'll try this whole design thing?
Right.
What resources did you use to start learning?
So at first, I'm a person who, like I said, learns by doing. So I would just read every, Photoshop blog tutorial out there on the web and just recreate everything. So it's basically just downloading everything I could, ripping it apart and trying to recreate it, or reading a blog and scrolling all the way down to the bottom and seeing how the poster final output was, trying to make it, failing really hard, and then going to the top and following step by step. So it started like that, with just like reading as much as I could and free resources. when I started getting a little bit more serious about it, I found a guy who was actually like a part of our church that I was attending, and he was a designer. He had worked for like Disney Interactive and a lot of other stuff. And I asked him if he could mentor me, and he did. So I got to spend a few hours a week with this gentleman, and him just giving me challenges like, do this. And it required like accountability, and I had homework that I had to do. And he became a really great friend of mine as well as a mentor. So that was, at first it was like learning for free on my own, just doing what I could. Then I reached out and I found somebody who could help me. And then I think the biggest, for me, I'm a really firm believer in not lying on your resume, but pushing yourself to do more than you think you can. So the next step from there was I had very little as far as like a portfolio and a skill set and experience, but I just applied for an internship and I got it. And I was like mind blown by it. So I was like, okay. So I was sitting in a seat in front of a big iMac that they provided, and they're like, okay, you got to make all these slides and these things. I was like, I'm going to figure out how to do that like on the spot. And so it was just putting myself into an uncomfortable position and challenging myself. That's how from the internship, I applied for like my first job at like an in-house, it was a tour company. I was like an in-house graphic designer, and they were asking me to do things. And then I was like, I'm pretty sure I could though, if you'd let me try. And they let me try. And it was just one of those things. So for me, I'm a really big, somebody who really believes in just pushing yourself, really committing to the time, and then asking things of yourself that even you don't think you can do, and just going for it. So that's kind of how I got started. And I think last thing I'll say is like, that's how I still kind of try to live and do things is, right now I'm having to do a lot of animation in After Effects for the startup that I work for. And I'm like, okay, let's figure it out. So just like learning and trying to figure it out. And I'm growing in that skill set, and we're using some of the stuff that I make, not all of it, but some of the stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I feel like when you're learning by doing, you have this project-based learning experience, which a lot of the time sticks with you much more than if you're just learning theory and then kind of you have the free field to apply those skills, and you're like, okay, where do I actually start?
Right. I always try to follow up the experience and the learning by doing with the theory. Like, I'm not a person that can read like the instruction manual first. I have to kind of look at all the pieces and get my own hands on it first. And then when I look back at the instructions, it's like the matrix, like the code all makes sense to me. I'm like, oh, okay, I failed enough now, I can see how it should go. So, but it is important that I always go back and look at the theory and then connect it, because then next time around, I can apply them a little bit more seamlessly together. So I think theory is important. It's just, for me, it comes as like the sidecar to the main vehicle of learning.
Fair enough. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because theory is still important, and understanding it is very important.
Totally.
So I'll start moving into the questions that I have from my audience.
Okay.
And everybody who's watching us right now, you guys can also ask us questions. We'd love to answer them. I'll just go through these ones first, and then we'll get to the questions from the chat. But one of the questions was around getting a degree versus learning using courses, and we've already touched on that. And what's fascinating about you is that you've done both. You've learned by this basically project-based learning style, and also you went back to school.
Right.
What would you recommend? Would you recommend for some people to go for one or the other, or is the combination good? Or what are your thoughts on that subject?
I think that is a loaded question. And I did a video one time called "Don't Go to Design School," and I don't regret that video, but I do think a little bit more explanation would have been good. So I think that either path is actually could be really, really valuable. It just depends on your situation. For me, by the time I got around to going back to school, I was already in my late 20s, married with one with my daughter and another baby on the way. So like going to full-time design school for me wasn't like a realistic option. So I did want to do it and see if I could glean anything else out of it. So I went to online school. I won't name the college because I didn't really like it, but it was like a 2-year accelerated bachelor program in web design and development. And that's what worked for me situationally. I know a lot of self-taught designers or developers who haven't gone to any school, and they're fantastic at it because their learning style, right? Like actually it works well with them being self-starters, self-learners, you know, driving themselves. Some people need a little bit more of like a classroom environment for accountability. And I think it kind of depends on the person. I will say that if you're older, you know, which I totally think there's a wave of people right now in their like late 30s, early 40s who are switching from careers into tech. I think that those people can forego going to like some sort of 2 or 4 year school and just learn online. Because I hate debt. I just am a horrible like hater of people going into debt for things that they can learn without like putting themselves under such burden. So I'll talk about the other side. I think school is good if you are young and you want that accountability and you are the type of person who likes to learn theory and do it alongside of other people. Then if that's what's going to help you thrive, I think you should do it. I just think that you should weigh out what your options are first. I think we live in a really cool age where like you don't have to go to a 4-year college anymore. If you want to be in this industry, you can do it in other ways. There's lots of people who are kind of trailblazing those paths to show you that it's possible. I think that's really cool.
Definitely. I feel like it could be one of the first industries where you don't necessarily need a bachelor degree. And you do a lot of the times, but it's just, you know, you need to prove your skills by your portfolio,
right,
using the projects that you've worked on. And you don't necessarily need to go to a university or do courses
right,
even to get there. It's
right.
just, yeah, it's very, very interesting.
I think it's cool if you want to, because I think I love school. If I could go back to school, I totally would, because it's fun. I like your whole existence is about learning and growing. I think that's so much fun. I'm like a habitual learner. But like you said, I totally agree. I think that like we're just in such a cool day and age where, especially in this industry, whether it's design or development, like you can make amazing things and then showcase those things, and then people can look at them and go, that's great. Actually, like I really respect that. I would love to have that on my team or that for my project. And that's like as simple as it needs to be nowadays. It's really cool. I love it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. And actually, a question that I get asked a lot, it's not on my list, but I want to ask it because it's a very important one. How did you start building your portfolio initially? How did you approach that?
Yeah. At first, I was like really young and naive, and I just put whatever I had. And I think that for me, that was the move that I made. I don't know if that's the right move. I probably would have gone and vetted my portfolio at the time a little better, but I just put anything that I had ever made inside of a physical design portfolio, and I took that to my first job. You know, if I could go back and do it again, or if I could give advice, I actually do like a series of like portfolio review stuff. And I don't think I have the most fantastic portfolio because I'm actually in the process of rebuilding my own online portfolio right now. But I do think that there are some good things and bad things to do. I think less is more. I think putting your best most current work in your portfolio and the work that you absolutely love to do and want to do more of, I think as long as you do those things, you're fine, because it vets a lot of portfolios are all about showing your work and getting work, right? It vets a lot of the problems with that. I put my best stuff in, my most current things in, and the things I want to do. The inquiries that you get from that are, I love this. I would like, right? It's not like you want to do UI design and somebody's asking you for a poster, or you want to do, you know, front end development, but somebody's asking you for like, do you know Rails? Can you like do my Rails application? You're like, oh, I mean, I kind of tampered with that a little bit and I put it in my portfolio, but I don't really want to do that or like to do that. So I just think less is more, and it's more powerful when you hone in on who you are. I think that's the biggest thing, is like, be who you are and show the best of who you are and who you want to be. It's like one of my favorite quotes is, who we are now is not who we will someday become. And I think always focusing on that person that you want to become is like the best thing you could do in your portfolio.
That's awesome. I love that. That's kind of projecting for the future and for the future projects.
Yeah, totally.
And preparing yourself for that.
Can I ask you something? Because I have a question. I'm really interested to know.
Sure.
I get this question. I've gotten this question a lot of times. You are also a developer, as well as like a UX designer. What do you think about developer portfolios? What does that look like? What is that what's comprised of in a developer's portfolio?
Well, I'm actually not a developer. I am a marketer.
Okay.
I have a marketing background, but
you're learning how to code. You are coding,
yes,
right? So like,
exactly.
What would you put inside of to show that skill set? How would you promote that skill set?
Yeah, absolutely. The same way that you were talking about, basically focusing on what would you like to, what kind of projects would you like to get involved in, and therefore highlighting the projects that you've done that demonstrate the skills and your abilities to actually execute on those kind of projects and the systems that are needed for whatever you want to get.
Gotcha.
And yeah, basically highlighting all these fun stuff, all these fun things that you have done that will take you to the next level, that will show the potential employer that you have experience and you have skills in these particular areas.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, it's really interesting. People are bringing it up to me like, well, what about like as a developer, somebody's learning how to code, what do I do? And I was like, that's a good point. I don't think I'm successfully like demonstrating my projects. I think I'm treating it more like a design portfolio. And I think there's better ways for me to show my love of front-end development as well. So I'm thinking about that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, and there's so many different ways in which you can showcase these things, right? You can have an online portfolio. You can also have a GitHub portfolio, and a lot of employers will actually ask you for that. So that is another thing to consider if you're thinking about highlighting the projects that you've worked on.
Right. One of the ways I really like, actually, and I was, because I've watched a bunch of your stuff and you really enjoy blogging, and I think that's awesome. I'm horrible. I'm horrendous at blogging. I try. I want to be better. But one of the things I really like is people teaching things, and they're learning by like kind of intaking the information and then learning how to teach it to others. And they're doing like, tutorial based like blogging over like, coding techniques and design techniques. There's a guy, his name is Mackenzie Childs. I don't know if you've ever seen his stuff on YouTube, but he is like an illustrator and is a designer, but he started out doing this whole series on, he had like just learned how to do Rails. He's like, now I'm going to show you how to do Rails. And he, in interviews with him, he claims like he learned more by teaching it than trying to learn it himself, because he was like accountable to the people he was trying to teach to. I just think that's really interesting, like coding tutorials and doing that almost like in a blogging sense as well, to kind of show a portfolio. You're like, hey, here's what I can do. I thought that was like an interesting thing for him to do.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, teaching other people is the best way to showcase that you know a lot of stuff, because to teach, you need to know the kind of the back end of how things work, right?
Yeah.
And I was doing this one really great JavaScript bootcamp, which was talking about why JavaScript does whatever it does. And you need to be able to understand that stuff if you do want to teach JavaScript, because you need to be able to tell people what it prioritizes and like the order of things that it addresses, for example. Yeah, as one of the things.
I think that word keeps coming up as we're talking, like accountability. Like, I think having people depending on you is, for me, is such a huge motivator. That's something I'm always like willing to jump into, is a situation where I'm being depended on for something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, accountability is very important, especially in this day and age.
Totally right.
My next question for you is, what front-end languages and frameworks or structures or systems have you had experience in, and what are your probably favorite ones to work in?
Right. I mean, I code HTML, CSS, JavaScript at like the basic kind of like front end stack side of things. I know a little bit of PHP, like a little bit of Ruby. I can do those things. I don't really like to do those things. So I stay more on this side of the house. I am playing right now a lot with, I'm trying to learn React, and I like Vue.js as well. I know there's a lot of those frameworks out there, and React is like the really popular one. So I feel almost like I'm supposed to like be learning it right now. Although as I've been playing with both, I'm really enjoying Vue a lot more, I think, because you can kind of just drop it into an already established project, and you don't have to worry about whether or not like how React has to be like, everything has to be parsed in the project and everything. So I'm learning those right now. I honestly, like, I started out for years, I knew HTML and CSS, and that's where I stopped. And then I just hacked around at jQuery. I don't know, like that's how I feel like I've talked to a lot of people, and that's how they started, was like learning jQuery. And jQuery is like the unpopular kid like nowadays when you talk about it. But I still think it's a good way to learn, because the syntax of it is a little easier and smoother for somebody who has no idea how to program in JavaScript. But then later on, I decided, like, it's my dog rooting around over here, sorry. Later on I decided, okay, I really need to stop depending so much on this dependency and start learning vanilla JavaScript. So those are like my bread and butter when I do stuff. And I'm trying to weave in like all the other things. Obviously, like modern kind of like front end workflows, like you got to have like Node installed, and you know, you're using package managers. Like I'm a big Gulp advocate for like my build system. Gulp.js, if you guys don't know, is like it's a task runner that just processes all of my stuff that I would normally do. Like it minifies my images, and it's, you know, it compiles my CSS and my JavaScript and all that kind of stuff. So I'm a big fan of task runners, and that's my favorite one. What else am I using? I was like a big Bower nerd. I don't know if you know what Bower is, but it's like it's like the package manager for like front end projects. So like if you want Bootstrap in your project, instead of going out and downloading Bootstrap and unzipping it, it's all in the command line, right? So you're like, hey, like Bower, go get me Bootstrap and install it. And it just pops it in, and it keeps up all your dependencies for your projects. So I was kind of like a big fan of it. There's some things, I'm really interested to hear your like take on this. There's some things I feel like are more work than they're actually good for. And they're like popular things, and everyone's like, this is so great, you gotta use this, you gotta use that. I'm like, it might be better not to. I don't know. Like, is there any of those things that you're learning, but like you're not convinced you fully need in your workflow yet?
I mean, there are a lot of different things, and some of the, for example, frameworks, when I tried to learn them, I feel like the barrier to entry is just so high that by the time you learn them, it's like, well, okay, I could have done this with something else,
right,
and kind of could have taken different pieces from something else. But I like this idea of Bower because, for example, Bootstrap was one of those things where it's like, well, I might just go and copy the CSS code, you know, whatever they're using. And Bower sounds like almost a smart personal assistant.
It's cool, it's fun, you know, and it's, for me, I feel like some projects and some developers, right, have lots of dependencies. Like they like to use a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it's like going to the salad bar and making their perfect salad. And I'm like, kind of just like a spinach with a little dressing guy, you know, like I don't need a lot. I shy away from frameworks like Bootstrap and Foundation and all those things, especially with CSS Grid being as amazing as it is right now. So I'm kind of I shy away from a lot of those things, and I don't think I am comfortable with as many dependencies. Personal preference, I think. everybody has personal preference.
Fair enough. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there's no right or wrong way. Whatever works for you.
I love that. Don't you love that?
I do.
I think that's the
really
coolest thing, because like we can hang out and talk and share like our workflow, the things we enjoy or don't enjoy, like in what we do. And it's like, nobody has to be right or wrong. It's like, you have your method and I have my method, and cool. Like maybe I can learn from your method. I just think that's one of the funnest parts about this job and about this industry, is the different ways people attack the same problem. So fun, so cool.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. I mean, it's problem solving from like all the different angles. It's awesome.
Yeah, totally.
And because we have 3 more minutes left, because
gosh.
before we go into your channel,
okay,
guys, you can find the link to Jesse's channel in my description. We're going to go live on his channel in 3 minutes. But one more question that came up a lot is, what would you recommend as the learning path for someone who is new to UX design?
Okay. Learning path for UX design in 2 minutes, ready, set, go. I think a successful thing to do would just to start sketching like wireframes, because I think so much of UX design is actually making sense of a problem, like putting pieces together. So I think there's some good books that I could probably recommend that I really, really love for UX design. But before you get there, start experimenting, right? It's my motto, like learn by doing. Take every website that you love, screenshot it, and sketch out that wireframe, and then hold them up against each other and try to find commonality between them. That would be like, if you had nothing, no resources, no books, no nothing, you have a pen and paper, and you have the time to try to figure things out on your own. That would be like step 1 for me. Because there are some solutions, right? Like I'm a firm believer that design is not art, so it's not subjective, it's very objective. So there's some objectivity to what you will find in looking through all those different wireframes you end up sketching out. You're like, wow, like why does everyone do it this way? And then start researching those questions. And I feel like in doing those 2 things, sketching things out and researching the results that you find, you will have like basically created your own curriculum that you've traveled down to understand how people use the web and how people use products. After that, funnest thing I think you can do is to look around at everything, not just web-based things, like this bookshelf, this couch, this lamp on my desk, and figure out, is there a better way to make that? And that's like Don Norman, who wrote The Design of Everyday Things, like one of my favorite UX books. It's the yellow one with the big red teapot on it. Love that book so much. He talks about doors and elevators, and I actually have an obsession with elevator buttons because of that book. Every elevator I walk up to, I take a picture of the elevator buttons, and I have I'm gonna write a blog about it someday when I stop hating blogging.
You should.
Because there's so many variations of how people apply the user experience design of a simple elevator button switch. And there's ones that are really good, and there's ones that are really bad. And when you start thinking like this, everywhere you look, you become a UX nerd and start seeing solutions and problems, and it just becomes like daily exercise. So you could do that before you read anything, and then read like all of Don Norman's books.
All of them.
All of them. Read all of them this week. Yeah.
Start. Go now.
Yes, absolutely. Is that helpful? I feel like that's what I would do if I was starting right now today.
Definitely. I think that is super helpful. And I mean, it's all about understanding what is already being done and why that is being done. So
absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. It was really, really nice talking to you, Jesse. Here on my channel, we're moving on to yours right now.
Yep.
And so, yeah, guys, the link to Jesse's channel is in the description, and to his live stream also in the description. We'll see you there very shortly.
See you guys there.
Bye.
Bye.